What's up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. And I know this kind of looks like a podcast setup, but we're not doing a podcast. Trust me, we're doing a final, I guess you would call this a parts release on what it took to build the third gen Camaro, which is the white car behind me that we call white trash. Everybody say hello. She's sporting her sunlight. She's sitting out there sunbathing. But guys, I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I've had quite a bit of people sit down and kind of like, or message me and ask me, hey, what do you have in this car? What does it take to build a car like this? And I'm be honest, I've never really sat down and added up what all I had in this car, just because I did spend a lot of money on the motor, and I did go with the EFI system and the Holly dash. So today we're actually going to sit down and we're going to add these things up. All right, guys. Welcome back to the channel, and we're going to start this out. I'm going to tell y'all what I paid for the car. And I did find the car locally, so I was actually able to drive this thing home. Didn't have to rent a trailer because this was before I had my car trailer. So I got lucky enough that I was able to drive this thing home. And I did have to pay taxes on this car, which everybody has to pay taxes. But so it's a 91 RS Camaro, and it had the 5-speed in it, had a 350 already in it, and it had some janky exhaust on it and stuff like that. It did have some wheels. The interior was super clean on it. I'm pretty sure y'all, if y'all go back to our video of when I brought the car home, you'll see what the car looked like. It was not that bad. It's not, you know, the cleanest car in the world, but it is a really good starter. And we ended up having to pay $6,000 cash after taxes and everything on this car, which I think was not a bad deal for a car. Did I want something older? Yes, I was looking for something older, but I was kind of, sorry guys, I was on a budget for buying this car, and I really didn't want to spend more than $7 or $8 grand on the car just because I knew what it was going to take to build the car. And there was a lot of clean RSs and Z28s out there. The only bad thing about the Z28s is they were automatic cars, majority of them. I did find like a couple that someone had swapped over like some T56 transmissions to. But we wanted something that we could create a project out of and actually build from the ground up. So I didn't want something that was already done, but I wanted something that was clean enough that I didn't have to do a whole bunch of restoration work to it. So when I found this car, it was local. It was literally like a mile and a half down the road from my work. So I went and looked at it one night. Super clean car. So that's what we ended up paying for the car. Next, we're going to move on to the engine on this car. This was the most expensive part of the car that, you know, I'd already pre-built this engine before. I had another car that I was building the engine for. It was a 74 Corvette. The biggest problem with the Corvette is we found out that the bird cage was completely rusted out in it. And if y'all don't know Corvettes, they're a fiberglass body, and they have almost like an exoskeleton built inside the fiberglass. That's how the car's built, because fiberglass by itself is not as strong as metal. It's very strong, but they did the exoskeleton to add for rollover stuff and if someone took an impact right in the top of the door. So the bird cage was rusted out in this car, and it was going to be way more than what the car was worth to even try to fix it. So I abandoned the project, and I lost quite a bit of money on that car, more than I would care to tell y'all right now. But yeah, guys, it'd be a lot more than what I really feel comfortable saying, because I did a lot to that car. And it's actually in one of our videos, if you guys want to go back and check it out. It's actually the Corvette that I did the hang on, guys, I was eating some of these spicy peanuts, man, and they got stuck in my throat. Dude, if y'all ain't never had these things, they're kicking. But yeah, the guy that bought the car from me is a buddy of mine. I told him everything that was wrong with the car, and he still bought it from me. I gave him a smoking deal on the car. I mean, I practically gave the car away. It had brand new brakes, coilovers, everything. Half the body work was done on the car, but we won't talk about that much more. So we have $6,000 for the engine. $6,000 for the car. And then the engine came out of the Corvette, and I was supposed to be building it for the Corvette to put back in it when we found the rust in the car. So I sold the Corvette. At this time I'd bought a show truck that I bought and I pretty much drove around and fixed up, and I sold it for some cash. And this is while the engine was being built. And I think I brought the engine home when I brought the truck home, because I was actually planning on and y'all can go back, there's another video from when I bought the show truck. It was the red S10. My plan was to put this big 350 in this little show truck that was already didn't need the motor in it. It had a brand new crate engine in it. So I abandoned that project and decided that I needed to just sell this truck the way it was, because I could bring a lot more money than trying to stuff a 350 in it and making it some high horsepower truck. It was perfect the way it was. So we ended up selling that truck. We got a pretty good profit off of that truck and kind of recouped some of our money. And then that's when we bought the third gen. I knew I was wanting a third gen. I just didn't know what bodies, like what, was I wanting to stay within the 80s? Was I want, 91 and 92 was the last year for the third gen. So I just knew as long as I could find one that was clean and cheap enough, I was going to buy it. So I did. So with the engine, without the EFI system, this is without the EFI, the dash, this was just the motor built, being put together, the cylinder heads, intake, and maybe some other miscellaneous parts. The front of the engine components, like the AC and the alternator, was already on the other engine that was in this car, so we just transferred them over. We were right at $8,000 on having this engine built, which I know a lot of people are going to be like, that's outrageous, $8,000 for an engine? You could have went to Summit and bought a factory 350 for $3,000 or $4,000. Yes, you could have went to Summit or GM or Blueprint. You could have went to several of these companies and bought a blueprinted 350 small block, factory Vortec heads. I know they're fairly cheap. I don't know the prices on them. But when I had this engine built, it's a fully blueprinted 358 cubic inch small block. So it's a 350 bored 40 over, and it's got a factory stroked crank in it, but it has different pistons and rods. It's got DSS forged race pistons. And then we put the engine all together and measured out for the cam. So the way the engine builder does it is he'll put everything together and check clearance levels, and then he kind of decides on what's the best cam lobe separation for this engine. And we ended up having a custom ground cam made for this engine. So this motor had quite a bit of custom parts in it, plus the machine work and having it hot tanked and a custom paint job put on it. I painted it, so luckily I saved some money there. And then of course having Paul build the engine for me, because there ain't no way I'm building this engine myself. It was $8,000. I know there's going to be people out there that say, why didn't you build an LS? Why didn't you build a stroker? Why didn't you put turbos on it? I tell you, at the time when I built this engine, all I knew is I had the block, I had some components off of it that I was wanting to try to reuse and that ended up not working, but we built the engine anyways, and I love it. The engine runs phenomenal. I beat the shit out of this engine, and it never misses a beat. It's never, dropped a cylinder. I mean, it's a great engine, and it's strong. 350s are very strong engines. We would like to, later on down the road, put some nitrous on it, but we'll see what happens. Alright guys, sorry about that. That was my neighbor. He's borrowing some tools from me. He's putting, I think, a trailer hitch or something in. So we built the engine. That's where we were. So $8,000 on that. You already know that. So then I had to figure out if the transmission and everything was good in this car. Luckily, it was a fully running driving car, so I got to drive it around. The only thing that I could really tell was the clutch was starting to slip on it. So I knew I was going to have to buy a clutch. That was $439 with a flywheel from McClure or something like that. It's hard to pronounce their name. So that wasn't a bad deal for a clutch, and that is a dual friction. I think it's called a Super Street clutch. It's like a in between like race clutch and street clutch, so it's not too hard to drive the car in the street. It is kind of funny to drive it. But then we also did a 4th gen upgrade on the drive shaft and did an aluminum one. It was a brand new one. It was $459. And then we put Corbeau seats in it, which those were pretty expensive, but the old seats were just worn out, and trying to have them recovered, the money you were going to spend on them was, I could buy new seats for that pretty much. And we ended up spending $1,116 on seats and brackets. So that's actually not that bad for seats and brackets. And if anybody's ever sat in the Corbeau seats, they're like nice seats, like real leather. I had these things specially made. So after that, of course, I originally was building this engine for, we were building it for a carburetor. And I'd already bought a carburetor for the car, or for the engine that I was going to put on the car. Well, funny story, and I won't go into like crazy detail, but we had a couple carburetors sitting around, and my dad accidentally grabbed the wrong carburetor, and actually ended up selling my brand new 680 quick fuel carburetor, which I wasn't upset about it. I was more just I couldn't stop laughing because I was just like, that's insane. So that happened, and I was like, well, this is just a perfect opportunity to buy a Holley EFI system, because I'd been wanting to run one of Holley's. This was right around when Holley had started really coming out with their EFI systems. The one where the unit, everything's built into all one unit. You don't have like something on the firewall and stuff like that. So we bought the EFI system, and I did buy the EFI system with the fuel management, which was a little bit more money, and I didn't need it. I didn't realize it until I got to tearing the car down apart. I didn't even really need it because it had a fuel pump in the tank, so all I had to do was buy an in the tank fuel pump, and that's what we ended up doing. But it was $1,010 for the EFI system, and that come with like AN fittings, hoses. It was pretty much everything. And of course, with the EFI system, I had to have one of the Holley dash systems too. I had to have one of the Holley dash systems. That was actually $940. I actually found a deal on that because I bought the I think it's like a 6.8 something screen. So it's not the big one, but it's the medium size one. And I found a deal for it, and it was $940 for that. And then what else do we have? Oh, I bought a rear diff for the car just because it was a one-tire fire. And it was drums on the back too. So instead of, buying a rear disc conversion for the car and a third member and axles and everything, I actually found a used differential out of a 4th gen, which was an LSD, and it already had disc brakes and everything on it. And I was like, well, I'll just start with this, and then later on down the road I can build this rear end up. So that's what I ended up doing. It was $800, and then that was pretty much it for like the main components. There's probably some smaller stuff that I'm missing that I bought at like O'Reilly's and stuff like that, but we ended up being right at $18,764 to build this car. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, what? Yes, we pretty much blew my budget on about everything that I was building on this car. And I think the biggest thing was the engine was not supposed to be, an $8,000 engine. But when you're building an engine, things can get away from you. I mean, just take an example, my brother. He just spent a whole buttload of money on an LS. LSs are way more expensive to build, especially when you're talking about putting race components in them. And the small blocks are also the same. If you want to build a small block, if you want to put good parts in a motor and make it, fast and stick together, you got to put money in it, and that's just what happens. So, with all that being said, am I happy with it? I love the car. Wouldn't change a thing on it. Now, I would like to build an LS for it later on down the road once this motor has done its diligence, which we're going to give it all of it and freaking just tear this engine out of it. This engine will not come out until it blows up or until I have another option to go in it, which I don't see this engine blowing up anytime soon. So unless I just like put a moonshot of nitrous on her and send her to the damn moon, which I would like to put nitrous on it. That's one of the next things we're talking about. But $18,764, that is pretty much putting the engine in it, the transmission, clutch, some other odd-end stuff, the EFI system, some other random things like hose clamps and fluids, oil, filters. I didn't add up all that. Plus, we don't have suspension on this car yet, which I am planning on putting suspension on the car. I would like to put a set of beefier axles underneath it. I'd like to put a third member in it that keeps the third member cover with the bolts on it that pushes against your main caps. They say those are good for the 10 bolts, just keeps them from flexing so much. So there's quite a bit of stuff we haven't finished on this car, but overall the car is almost there. It's almost where I want it to be, but we still got a lot left. And I hope y'all stick around and see some of this stuff, because we've got some good stuff coming up here soon. But guys, I'm gonna make this video short. I'm not gonna sit here and talk y'all's heads off. I appreciate y'all stopping by, and let me know in the comments if this was helpful for you, if you're building a project to kind of see where you want to be. But guys, until next time, we'll see you later.